Progress becomes terrifying when it demands a body count, and now the news transforms the cursed radio into a weapon of healing, exposing how easily compassion curdles when doctors decide who is expendable. Greetings, schools, and welcome to a dive into horror television. Tonight we explore Friday the 13th, the series, and now the news. We open to a psychiatrist using a garter snake to scare a patient out of her mind in some sort of exposure therapy from hell. There's an antique cathedral-style radio that plays music without being plugged in. We cut to a patient, Mary, in her room with the odd radio. It's sleep time, so Mary clutches her doll and tries to get some sleep. A man interrupts the music on the radio to say that there are thousands of snakes loose in the asylum in the ward she's in. Under her blanket, there's a mound of slithery snakes, and Mary can't bear it. They surround her, and she screeches, but by the time the staff get to her, she dropped dead. The man on the radio tells us that Dr. Avril Carter has had an incredible psychiatric breakthrough. Her research has cured a paranoid psychotic serial killer. Dr. Avril goes to check on that patient. His name is Craig. The voices telling him to hurt others have gone away. She tells him he's cured. We head over to the thrift shop. Micki and Ryan received a letter alerting them to an antique radio that was sold in an estate sale. They think the item is cursed, so they go to the asylum to check in. They meet up with Dr. Kevin Finch in hopes of buying the radio from the hospital. The doctor doesn't know anything about the antique radio, and all of the patient's possessions are usually turned over to their estate upon death. Micki and Ryan ask to walk around the hospital to look for it, but the doctor denies them the opportunity. He must look out for the patient's best interests. They have enough disturbances as is. They have a good feeling the radio is probably in Ward A, the most dangerous ward in the hospital. Ryan plans to go there another time, even if it means breaking the rules. Dr. Avril is sure Craig will never hurt anyone again. He's cured of the voices that make him hurt others, and now he can live in the minimum security wing. Another patient, John Gibson, overhears their conversation and wants to be cured too. Dr. Avril visits Dr. Kevin. The new case study she published has garnered a lot of attention, and she's been invited to speak at an event. Dr. Kevin wishes he had some of her luck. She assures him that it wasn't luck that got her where she is. She takes on the toughest cases to get attention. Dr. Kevin asks her why she released Craig to prison. His condition is not likely to be cured, especially so quickly. We learn that Dr. Kevin has had 6 patients die under his care lately. Dr. Avril relishes in bringing up the deaths to tear him down. Outside, Ryan is ready to jump a fence to get into the asylum. He reaches the top and gets one hell of a shock. It's an electric fence, and he gets old sparkied. Ouch. Ryan is found by a staff member and brought inside. He needs medical attention, so they go to see a doctor. One of the nurses goes to Dr. Kevin while he's doing exposure therapy with a patient. He tells the nurse to find another doctor. Ryan wakes up and he's strapped down with Dr. Avril examining him. He tells her that he's there due to a frat initiation gone wrong. Good save. He's let go. Ryan realizes that Dr. Avril probably has something to do with the radio they're looking for. They go back to the thrift shop to find more information about the radio. They don't see anything helpful. They look into Dr. Avril's research and find it fishy that so many of Dr. Kevin's patients are dying while Dr. Avril's patients are mysteriously being healed. At the asylum, Dr. Kevin is doing exposure therapy with a patient. Dr. Avril wants to see John Gibson's files, but that's one of Dr. Kevin's patients, and he doesn't want her interfering. Gibson is dangerous, specifically towards women. Dr. Avril insists. She accuses him of killing his patients by forcing them to face their fears before they're ready for it. He is stunned by her hubris, and so am I. Micki is at the asylum to speak with the doctor. She's told to stay out of the ward and wait, but she goes in anyway and meets Gibson. The radio is playing in Dr. Avril's office. We learn that Gibson is going to be cured tonight, following the violent death of another patient. Dr. Avril brings the radio into Stone's room. Of course, it's the patient that Dr. Kevin was working with earlier that day. Dr. Avril finally comes to get Micki before anything happens to her. Stone is in his room when the radio reports that the asylum is engulfed in flames. He screams his head off. He's covered in flames and his room is filled with fire. He jumps through a window to his death, and poor Ryan sees him fall to his death. Dr. Kevin can tell something is off about this death. He notices the radio is missing, and the only one who came inside the holding cell was Dr. Avril. The radio reports that there will be 2 other deaths at the asylum before midnight tonight, but Dr. Averill will receive a Nobel Prize and the cure for Gibson's mental illness. Dr. Kevin is coming into the office, so Dr. Averill puts the radio away as fast as lightning. He wants to know where the radio is. He remembers some kids coming to see him and warning that the radio may be hurting people. The radio makes a noise, and the doctor goes to get it, but the evil Dr. Averill whacks him in the head with a lamp, knocking him out. She strolls him to a patient's room and pushes him in, then watches him get beaten to death. What a brutal end for Dr. Kevin. Micki's card falls out of his pocket and she picks it up. Gibson watched her kill the doctor, and he says it feels good, doesn't it? Micki gets a call from someone at the asylum saying that they found the radio. Dr. Averill uses Gibson to make the phone call. It looks like Micki is in some serious trouble. She goes to the asylum that night and walks in through a creepy door. Ryan has the idea to climb the fence again, this time with rubber gloves. Micki wanders the hallways looking for Dr. Kevin, while Ryan hops over the fence. Micki is grabbed by a patient and forced onto the ground. The patient starts choking her and they wrestle. She grabs a hold of some blunt object and whacks him in the head with it. This does the trick and she escapes the room. He wakes up and finds Ryan there, asking where Micki is. He's clobbered over the head by Dr. Averill. Ryan is tied down with the cursed radio playing next to him. His death has to look like an accident. Micki tries to find them. She has until 11:55 to make it happen. Otherwise, he's dead. Imagine killing innocent people to cure a convicted serial killer of his illness. Someone pulls the breaker, and they lose power. Ryan is almost free of the straps when Micki, the doctor, and Gibson walk in. The doctor shocks Gibson so severely that he looks dead. The radio announces the death of Dr. Averill and says she will not be receiving the Nobel Prize. She picks up the radio in disbelief, and she's viciously annihilated by her own tool of terror. Micki picks up the radio and we head out. Micki is tired of almost dying all the time on these missions, but she doesn't want to give up either. The radio starts talking, giving them one final fright. Exposure therapy in legitimate clinical context relies on consent, pacing, and a patient's sense of safety. This episode deliberately strips those elements away. Fear is imposed suddenly, absolutely, and without agency. Patients are not guided through their phobias, they're ambushed by them. The radio's broadcasts function as a perverse amplification of institutional power, transforming internal anxieties into inescapable realities. What should exist only in the mind becomes physically lethal, collapsing the boundary between psychological distress and bodily harm. The episode makes clear that this approach does not heal trauma, it reproduces it. Patients are traumatized under the guise of progress, and their deaths are quietly folded into the rhetoric of innovation. By framing terror as a necessary step towards recovery, the institution redefines suffering as productive. Pain becomes data, panic becomes proof of efficacy. This is how cruelty is laundered into professionalism. Dr. Averill's methods reveal how easily fear can be weaponized when clinicians prioritize outcomes over people. Her confidence rests on the assumption that results justify means, even when those means destroy vulnerable patients. The radio externalizes her philosophy. It offers certainty, control, and dramatic resolution in exchange for human lives. That bargain mirrors real-world histories of psychiatric abuse, where marginalized patients have been subjected to extreme interventions because their fear was seen as expendable. Dr. Averill presents herself as a visionary clinician devoted to curing the incurable, but the episode steadily reveals that her primary commitment is not to patients, but to recognition. Altruism becomes a costume, convincing enough to pass institutional scrutiny, yet hollow at its core. Her self-image is built on contrast. She defines her success against the failures of others, particularly Dr. Kevin, whose patient deaths she invokes not as tragedies but as rhetorical leverage. In doing so, she reframes care as competition. Healing is no longer about alleviating suffering, it is about producing results that can be published, rewarded, and celebrated. Patients become instruments through which prestige is accumulated. The cursed radio literalizes this logic. It guarantees outcomes, cures, accolades, advancements, so long as someone else pays the price. Dr. Averill's willingness to accept this exchange reveals the ethical sleight of hand at the heart of her ambition. She does not see herself as sacrificing patients, she sees herself as optimizing a system. The language of progress allows her to convert moral violations into professional milestones. Crucially, the episode shows how ambition hides most effectively behind socially approved goals. Who would object to curing mental illness? Who would question a doctor who takes on the hardest cases? Dr. Averill exploits this moral insulation. Her confidence stems from knowing that success stories will eclipse the dead, and that institutional memory favors breakthroughs over bodies. The show also underscores how ambition narrows moral vision. Dr. Averill becomes increasingly indifferent to consent, proportionality, and basic human dignity. Each death is justified as necessary, each escalation framed as unavoidable. The more she invests in her narrative of benevolence, the less capable she becomes of recognizing her own violence. Altruism, once corrupted by ego, no longer requires empathy, only justification. By the episode's end, her downfall is not ironic, but inevitable. The same logic that allowed her to sacrifice others eventually consumes her. The radio, once a symbol of control and reward, turns inward. Ambition, stripped of its moral disguise, reveals itself as self-annihilating. Craig's recovery and Gibson's promised cure raise uncomfortable questions about what society considers acceptable outcomes. Violent patients are prioritized over fearful ones. A serial killer's silence is valued more than the lives of non-violent patients. The episode asks whether a cure achieved through bloodshed is a cure at all, or merely a rebranding of violence. Mental illness here is treated as a problem to be erased rather than understood. Dr. Kevin Finch serves as a counterpoint to Averill, but not a heroic one. Though he is troubled by her methods, he participates in a system that already harms patients through reckless exposure therapy. His objections come too late, and his authority collapses under Averill's manipulation. The episode is clear. Complicity does not require malice. It only requires silence, hesitation, and a willingness to look the other way. The asylum itself becomes a closed ecosystem where accountability is impossible. Patients die, records disappear, and responsibility is endlessly deferred. The episode presents media not as a mirror of reality, but as a machine that actively constructs it. News, sound, and storytelling do not simply report events, they determine which lives matter, which deaths are acceptable, and which truths are allowed to exist. Reality becomes something edited, framed, and distributed rather than something lived. The cursed radio functions as a symbol of narrative power. It doesn't just transmit information, it produces outcomes. By deciding who is saved and who is erased, it mirrors how media institutions shape public understanding through selective focus. Success stories are amplified, while casualties are rendered invisible or meaningless. What cannot be turned into a compelling narrative is quietly discarded. The episode also shows how authority is manufactured through media. Dr. Averill's legitimacy grows not because her methods are ethical, but because her story is convincing. Media validation replaces moral accountability. Once her narrative of genius and progress is established, it shields her from scrutiny. The audience is encouraged to trust the story being told rather than interrogate the process behind it. This manufactured reality is sustained through repetition and emotional manipulation. The radio's broadcast create a rhythm of hope and resolution that discourages doubt. Similarly, real-world media often relies on familiar arcs, problem, breakthrough, hero, to produce comfort and certainty. These structures flatten complexity and make systemic harm feel like an unfortunate but necessary footnote. Importantly, the episode suggests that participation in manufactured reality is collective. Listeners, viewers, and institutions all play a role by accepting the narrative as truth. Silence becomes complicity. By consuming the story without questioning its costs, the public helps stabilize a reality where violence is normalized through storytelling. Ultimately, the horror lies in how this process is. No elaborate conspiracy is required, only trust in narratives that promise order, progress, and meaning. And now the news warns that when media replaces ethics, reality itself becomes something that can be engineered at the expense of those written out of the story. Marshall McLuhan famously said the medium is the message, and that applies here. Radio's authority is not derived from content alone, but from its form. Broadcast media implies neutrality, distance, and objectivity. By speaking in the language of public information, like news, announcements, updates, the artifact cloaks violence and institutional legitimacy. The episode suggests that once harm is rooted through the correct medium, it ceases to appear as harm at all. The episode can be read as an anatomy of how media does not simply represent reality, but produces it. a core insight shared by multiple strands of media theory. A famous quote from Baudrillard is, "The simulacrum is never that which conceals the truth. It is the truth which conceals that there is none." The quote means that in our media-saturated world, copies, or simulacra, have replaced reality so completely that we mistake the simulation for the real thing, making us believe the simulation is the truth, when actually there's no original reality left to even find. The simulacrum isn't hiding truth, it is the truth, because the real is gone, creating a hyper-reality where signs and symbols refer only to other signs, not any underlying reality. Baudrillard's ideas is basically the media can stop showing reality and start replacing it. In this episode, the radio broadcast doesn't just report what's happening, it creates what people accept as real. When the broadcast works and patients seem cured, everyone treats that outcome as proof that the system is good and legitimate. The results become more important than how those results are achieved. The people who die because the radio are hidden from view, they are not part of the story being told, since the audience only sees healing and success. That becomes the truth. The harm disappears because it isn't visible or talked about. Over time, the broadcasted version of events feels more real than the actual suffering behind it. So the horror isn't that the radio lies outright, it's that it produces a reality people believe in. Once something looks successful on the air, no one feels the need to question it. Reality ends up following the broadcast instead of the broadcast reflecting reality. The problem is not the media is lying, the problem is that media creates something that feels so real and convincing that people stop looking for any deeper truth at all. That is exactly how the radio functions in the episode. The broadcast produces visible results. Patients appear cured, careers advance, awards seem guaranteed. Those outcomes become the truth everyone accepts. Once that happens, no one asks what had to be destroyed to make those realities possible. The deaths no longer count as reality because they're not part of the story being told. Baudrillard is warning that when a system produces believable success, people stop caring whether it is ethical or even real. The appearance of healing replaces actual healing. The narrative replaces responsibility. In that sense, the radio does not hide violence. It makes violence disappear by overwriting it with a more attractive version of reality. In the final moments, the radio turns on Dr. Averill, stripping her of the very future she engineered through murder. Her death is not framed as justice, but as inevitability. Tools designed to control others eventually consume their wielder. The episode offers no clean victory, only survival and exhaustion. Micki's closing wariness underscores this point. Stopping evil does not undo the damage already done. It simply prevents further harm. The episode argues that the greatest danger in psychiatric care and institutions more broadly is not ignorance but certainty. When fear is treated as data, people as experiments, and success as justification, violence becomes easy to rationalize. The episode ultimately warns that progress without ethics is indistinguishable from cruelty, and that any system willing to trade lives for results has already failed the people it claims to protect. Dr. Averill was played by Kate Trotter, and she's known for True Love, Upside Down, and The Silence. She's still working today. Dr. Kevin was played by Kurt Reese, who was in Naked Lunch, Short Circuit 2, and Lobby. The director is Bruce Pittman, who directed the last movie, Where the Spirit Lives, and Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. The writer was Richard Brenner, who's a bit of a horror anthology nut just like us. He wrote an episode of Monsters and 2 episodes of Tales from the Dark Side. What did you think of this one? I liked it a lot, and I'm rating it an 8.5 out of 10 for the series Friday the 13th. Leave me your thoughts down below, and until next time, remember to be well and stay spooky.